joining us. Dr. Carson, do you stand by that comment?
Absolutely.
So you're
no question about it. Anybody can easily find out about Margaret Sanger and what kind of person she was and how she was a strong advocate of eugenics, wrote articles about eugenics, and believed that certain members of the population weakened the population and was not enamored of black people. And so it is quite true that the majority or plurality of their clinics are in minority neighborhoods.
So, and you're saying that it's a direct correlation. In other words, she decided to put Planned Parenthood clinics in African American communities to control the population of African Americans in the community.
I think it's a very clear direction that she's going in with her philosophy.
All right. And you say she was developing some eugenic studies, which would mean a control of African Americans in society. Is it that, or is it, let me play devil's advocate a little bit, that 30% of abortions occur among black women, whereas the population number is 13%. So it's almost triple the number of abortions rate for African Americans as whites.
Well, it brings up a very important issue, and that is, do those black lives matter? The number one cause of death for black people is abortion. And I wonder if maybe some people might at some point become concerned about that and ask, why is that happening? And what can be done to alleviate that situation? So I think that's really the important question.
Dr. Carson, so if you're right, and Planned Parenthood does have a mandate to go into black communities to control the black population, what would you do? What would you suggest people do now? And then if you were president?
Well, one of the important things is to educate people. I encourage people to go and read about Margaret Sanger and go and read about the beginnings of this organization so that you know what you're dealing with. One of the ways that they're able to perpetrate the deceit is because people are not informed. The more people are informed, the less likely these kinds of things happen. Some of our founders expressed how important it was to have an informed populace because they could not be manipulated.
So would they, we're talking over literally decades over time, and the policy is still being implemented in 2015 of literally black population control through Planned Parenthood?
Well, what's going on now versus what went on at the beginning, I don't know. Probably a lot of the people in Planned Parenthood themselves don't know about this history. And perhaps if they did, they wouldn't be quite so anxious to be involved with it.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about some of the other things that Planned Parenthood is accused of. They're accused of selling baby parts. Now, can you talk to us about baby parts, or can you talk to us about fetal tissue? Because I understand that you've worked with fetal tissue in the past.
Well, I have not actually worked with fetal tissue. The left has put out information saying that I've done research on fetal tissues because my name appears on an article in which the pathologist compared specimens that I delivered from the operating room to some fetal tissues in an attempt to decide which way the cells were being differentiated. My part is to do the operation and supply the tissue. Mm-hmm. At that point, I move on to the next operation. So to suggest that I'm in the laboratory actually doing the research or retrieving fetal tissue is nothing but propaganda.
And I think that's an important distinction to make, and I'm glad you made it here on The Factor tonight, because it's been swirling all day long that Dr. Ben Carson has worked with fetal tissue. He's done studies with fetal tissue, and you're saying what you've done is, after a procedure is done, maybe it was to save a mother's life, you may have been in contact with fetal tissue, but you had no part in the scientific research of the tissue once it's left the operating room.
Correct. And also bear in mind that all pathology departments will have a whole array of tissues, from, day one of conception until, 99 years old. And if you use the tissue if you're comparing or looking for a disease process in elderly people, does that mean you're doing geriatric research on geriatric tissue? No, it means you're looking at your tissue bank and you're making comparisons to derive information. And those fetal tissues, by the way, come from a variety of different places. Ectopic pregnancies, spontaneous abortions. But just because, they get the fetal tissue, does it mean they should throw it out? Of course they don't. That's how science is advanced.
Right, and I think the law is the reason why the law came involved into the Planned Parenthood is because they were accused of profiting from the fetal tissue. Dr. Carson, can we turn to politics a little bit? Donald Trump's rise in the polls, he seems to have a lot of staying power. Your thoughts on the Trump president